Hello, friend. I'm Micah McCurry. Welcome to Bible Tract Echoes. I'd like to invite you for a few moments of reminiscing and respect for our nation. Oh, beautiful, for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood. From sea to shining sea. You may ask why, Brother Micah, why did we just spend those moments? I am convinced that those who forget their past are destined to repeat it. You've heard me say this before, but we take heritage and legacy extremely seriously here at BTI. And so, for just a scant minute, if that, we paused to remember, to recollect. We've been given much, haven't we? As a nation, as Christians, of course, but then individually. I think of my family, those that have invested in me. I think of this ministry. I think of Dr. Paul Levine and how he laid the foundation with God's help for Bible Tracts Incorporated. But while thinking about our history, I cannot help but remember this specific day. Maybe, just maybe you remember, 20-something years ago, September 11th, 2001. In just a moment, we will hear from some of the staff at Bible Tracts, and they will answer the question where they were. But I recall where I was. I was a boy, scarcely a teenager, not even. My father was stationed in Germany. An AFN, Armed Forces Network, that's how service members, at least at that time, I don't know today, but at that time, that's how service members could watch American television and things, and the TV was on. And I recall it being interrupted, whatever program I was watching. Who knows, Andy Griffith or something, but it was interrupted by the announcement. It was the afternoon in Germany, 6, 7, 8 hours ahead of the East Coast, and it happened, as you may recall, in the morning. I don't recall quite what I was thinking, but I can still remember the pit in my stomach. I wonder, where were you? There are listeners right now that were not alive at that time. I don't think we should forget. I'm looking off into space. I don't know why. Normally I'll look directly at the camera, but something about this topic. So somber, isn't it? I'd like to take a moment and hear from Austin and Matt and Todd, some of our staff men that work here at BTI. And while you think about where you were, you think about that day, and you think about history, legacy, heritage, listen to these men tell us where they were that day.
On September 11th, 2001, I was working at Sun Graphics in Mansfield, Ohio, and the owner of the company came out and asked if I had heard the news. And I said no, so we turned on the radio, and I remember that day, all the presses stopped, we stood around the radio, and we were heartbroken, of course, at the devastation that was going on and the attack of our country. I had actually just got out of the military the year before that, and I called a recruiter the next day to see what my options were about rejoining, because I was ready to go and defend this great nation. Of course, at that time, They were not taking guys like me, but I would have gladly went to fight for our country. But I'll never forget that day. My cousin actually was flying a pilot out of Boston. One of the planes left the Boston terminal, and we could not reach him, had any contact with him for a day, and praise the Lord, he turned out to be okay. But I'm thankful for the men and women on those flights that took a stand and downed one of the planes before it reached civilization, and it's a day that I will never forget.
On September 11th, 2001, I was 15 years old. I was attending a school fundraiser trip we called a bike-a-thon. We were on a long bike trip, and word came from some of our chaperones that a tower in New York had been hit. And I remember the unknown. We weren't around any kind of news reporting or anything. We were just out on a bike ride. And I remember thinking to myself, not really understanding what all was taking place. We didn't know the extent of what was going on. And then we heard that a second tower had been hit. And it was a little frightening as a teenage boy as we were traveling down the bike path. And it was just surreal thinking of what others were going through on that day, the tragedy that was taking place in their life as we were just enjoying a peaceful day riding down a bike trail. And it was a somber thing, and it was a devastating event.
On September 11th, 2001, I was stationed at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. My roommate and I were explosive detection dog handlers, and we'd been assigned a Secret Service detail for the United Nations General Assembly in New York that month. So we had orders to report to the World Trade Center on September 14th. So on Tuesday the 11th, I was getting health certs at the veterinary clinic for our dogs to fly up there on the 13th. And when I came out of the vet clinic and turned the radio on in the vehicle, the first plane had hit the towers, and I listened while the second one hit. So woke my roommate up, and we watched it all unfold on television and changed the course of our term in the Marines and things we were doing. But God has a plan.
I hope you've taken a moment to reflect within your own self. You may be asking, though, and rightfully so, Micah, why do you spend so much time seemingly focused on the past? You can't drive a vehicle looking in the rearview mirror, and you can't direct the ministry of Bible Tracts Incorporated if you're always looking over your shoulder, and you'd be right. But I'm convinced that we stand on the shoulders of giants. What a fool I would be to look back at those that came before, those that paved the way. Why do I spend so much time talking about my predecessor, Mark Smith? Why do I focus on Dr. Paul Levine so often? Number one, I believe it's only right, credit where credit's due. But I believe I have much to learn from these men. You realize, I've been the director of this ministry for a scant 3.5 years. I guess I'm approaching 4 years now. What a blessing. What a weight, in a good way. What a responsibility to consider. 85 years of a heritage. Think about Dr. Paul, his wife Dorothy, and what they put, blood, sweat, and tears, into this ministry. Began as a young couple and ended their life faithful to God's calling and his cause. I'm thankful for that, and I believe we all should be. But as we do look back, we focus on the future. There is more to come. Oftentimes, when a friend says, "Hey, I'll see you soon," I'll respond, it's not the height of wit, I'll admit, but someone said it one time and it just stuck with me. I'll say this: good Lord willing, and the church don't rise. Normally, we say Lord willing and the creek don't rise, right? Well, one of these days, there's going to be a trumpet that sounds, the eastern sky will split, and he'll call us home. Good Lord willing, and the church don't rise. But friend, that hasn't happened yet. Therefore, you and I, we've still got some work to do. And I'd encourage you to join me. I'd encourage you to link arms with Christian brothers and sisters, not for the sake of ecumenicism, but for the sake of the gospel, for the sake of seeing people saved. I'd encourage you to use gospel tracts, and that reminds me. There's a gospel tract. If I've mentioned it once, I've probably mentioned it half a dozen times over the past 2 months, but I've just found so many opportunities to use it. So if you would, buckle up one more time, because I want to tell you about a gospel tract. On a day like today, I don't know if there is a tract that's more appropriate to talk about than this one right here. I know I've mentioned it in weeks past, but this one is called The Guardian. In this particular gospel tract, I've had a lot of opportunities, the Lord's allowed, over these past few days, few weeks, to hand this one out. You may have mentioned a few days ago, a week ago, that I was at a fair, had the opportunity to be a part of some fair outreach, saw some people saved, but I also got to give The Guardian to some police officers, some sheriff's deputies. I'd encourage you to go to BibleTractsInc.org and order some of The Guardian. It's specifically, here on September 11th, talking about EMS, fire, police. I think this is the right tract to talk about today. And speaking of this gospel tract, Brother Matt, join me if you would, here on camera and on the microphone. We've got Matt Pearson. You're the co-author with me on this gospel tract. We originally wrote one called The Warrior, right?
Yes.
And you were a career Marines for how long?
21 years.
21 years, and leveraged that experience into the gospel work now, putting the gospel out all over the place in this gospel tract. But we got to talk about a lighter topic here. We're wearing the same shirt. And for those of you that are on radio, you can't quite get the full effect here. Long story short, I saw these at Costco, and they had your size and my size. I said, hey, you want one? And they're like $10. You can't go wrong with that, $10 shirt. So anyway, we're wearing the same shirt today. And you can, if you're really curious what it looks like, you can go over to YouTube and make sure you watch it if you're not already watching it on YouTube. But Brother Matt, we've got an open house coming up here very soon, September 30th. Of this year, and give the folks maybe 30, 45 seconds or so about why listeners to Bible Tract Echoes, why should they come to the open house?
Well, we have a lot of partners that help it, spread the gospel, and they use this tool, these gospel tracts, to witness for Jesus. And as partners and as brethren, in His kingdom, then we want to be able to meet each other when possible in the fellowship. And so this is an opportunity to come here and see where our operation is, where we store the tracts, meet the guys that are producing the tracts and sending the tracts out, and get some wonderful food at the same time.
Absolutely. I was hoping you were going to make sure you added that. I'm already, my what do you call it? My chops, or what do you call it? Licking my chops. That's what I was looking for. But I'm excited about that smoked chicken. I'm excited about this. I think
Who
the
doesn't
Lord's,
like smoked chicken?
You can't go wrong with that. But Matt's going to be there. Austin's going to be there. Todd, you've heard from today, all going to be there. I'd encourage you to join us September 30th from 1 to 5 p.m. And here's the address real quick. This is not our mailing address, but this is our physical address. It's 603 West Prairie Street, Odell, Illinois. And if you'd like more information, shoot me a text at 309-316-7240. God bless. Have a great day for His glory.